What is going on, friends? How are we doing? So excited that you are here, y'all. So excited to hear. I'm just pumped to see your faces. I mean, I can't see your faces, but you know what I mean. Here's what I love for you to do. If you could do me a favor, put in the chat. Let me know, where are you at? Where are you at? Scott, we're working on the theme music, brother. I'm excited to say it's probably going to be here in a couple of weeks. My guest last week, Douglas Wydick, is actually making me a fresh theme song. But trying to get fancy out here. But don't worry, Scott. It's coming in, brother. I'm excited for you to hear it for sure. My friends, where are you chiming in from right now? Let me know in the chat. St. Paul, Minnesota, my guy. What's going on? Oh, Bits out here. What's up, Nils? How we doing? Clemson in the building. Moved to Arizona. Hope Arizona's treating you well. You're right, brother. We just got a little fancy with some stuff. My friends, super excited for the show that we are going to get started in just a second. As always, if I sound good to you, do me a favor and smash that heart button, smash that thumbs up button, and let me know if it sounds good, just so I know the audio is clean and crispy out here. We got Chi-Town in the building. We got Durham in the building. What's up, Bulls? So I love it. I love it. Jesse, I know Cristina paid you to watch. I love it. What's going on? Ashbury Park, freaking Jersey. We got Atlanta in the building. My friends, I'm excited that you are here. Let's get the show started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Diner Talks with James. I'm James. Super excited for another amazing episode. This week we have Cristina Pérez-Simmons, a wonderful friend and a brilliant woman. I'm excited for you to meet her as always, and I'm excited for you all to be here. My friends, I'm excited to say, I'm just going to say excited a few more times. But we got some cool things happening with Diner Talks, moving and shaking. We got a theme song that's going to be coming out in a few episodes. Our last episode guest, Douglas Wydick, is making it for us. And so really excited, y'all. We got some cool things in the work, but always, as always, we got to start off with tonight's show with the top three. My friends, I went home to New York recently. And there were some phrases that I found myself saying when I came back from New York. Like, whenever I come back, it's always I'm always like, hey, how you doing? We say over there, hey, all right, oh, hey, oh, right? I always have these New York phrases that I love, but there are some phrases that I heard that just reminded me of how iconic New York is. So the first one of those phrases is a very simple one. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Now it sounds really polite, right? Like if you both show up at the bagel shop together and the first person goes, go ahead. It sounds like it's very polite. Like, oh, please, after you. No, there's always this bite of sarcasm. Like, yeah, sure. Okay. No, please let me roll out the red carpet for you. No, please go ahead. I just love the little bite of sass in every New York comment. Next, the next thing is that in the South, they say, well, bless your heart, bless his heart. Oh, just bless their heart. Oh my gosh. In New York, we say the phrase, listen, not for nothing, but I'm about to drop a little honesty on you. Or the other phrase that New Yorkers love to say is, listen, no disrespect, but your mother's ugly. You know what I mean? So instead of bless your heart, it's no disrespect. Hey, not for nothing, but I love that. And the last phrase that I missed hearing all the time is, oh, you're from Jersey? Sorry to hear about that. All right, my friends, up next, the top three shows that I have binge watched during quarantine. First off, Ugly Delicious. If you haven't watched this, it's a documentary type series, docu-series with Michael Chang, and he explores all these really amazing foods and how they are done around the world. What does pizza look like around the world? What does meat on a stick look like from around the world? What do dumplings look like from around the world? It is done so well. It's incredible. Next is Letterkenny. It's maybe my favorite show on earth right now. It's called Letterkenny. It's about these good old boys from a small town in Canada. It's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. Letterkenny is I'm gonna mail you a letter to some guy named Kenny. Check that one out. It's on Hulu. And last but not least, as soon as quarantine started, Tina said, listen, we got to come up with some shows to watch. I think we got to dig deep in the archives. And my friends, we just finished Boy Meets World. And let me tell you, some of those Mr. Feeney quotes still slap, y'all, okay? Mr. Feeney's still out here teaching people today. If you watch Boy Meets World growing up, let me know. I can honestly say that Topanga helped me become a man. So, last but not least, my guest tonight, Cristina Perez, she and I went to Clemson University today. Not together. We were ships in the night, but we both went to Clemson. Go Tigers, baby. We out here, and these are my top 3 Clemson moments. First off, that one night where I made out with someone in the pouring rain in the middle of the band practice field. That happened. Anyway, next, Clemson football. Of course, those game days are incredible. Listening to the band that shakes the Southland, watching them run down the hill. Unfortunately, when I was there, they weren't that good, but it was still special. And last but not least, my favorite karaoke memory, and I know Cristina knows about this, is doing my favorite Clemson memory is doing karaoke at TD's, my friends. The cohort would always go over there, and everybody would have a really good time. And I won the karaoke competition. It was a 10-week bracket-style karaoke competition. I won it with Bye, 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 and I won $1,000, my friends. Shout out to that. Those are my top three. I'm excited to bring out our guest. She is the one, the only Miss Cristina Pérez-Simmons. And she is an incredible woman, just a badass of a woman. She is an expert in instructional design. She's a wonderful facilitator and an immaculate, incredible educator. She is also a badass Latina woman. And she's just a dear friend. I'm really excited for you to meet her. Like I said, we both went to Clemson together, so we went back and friends. I also officiated her and Jesse's wedding, which was one of the most special days of my life. I don't care what it was for them. But with that being said, let me bring her out right now. Ladies and gentlemen, clap it out, even though I can't hear you, for Cristina.
I feel like I need to do a little bow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bow to the audience.
Yeah, and record that intro to hype me up all the time.
What's going on, fam? How are you?
I am good. Just always here at home. Mm-hmm. And wondering what day it is, and COVID.
Yep, that's about right.
Having a good time.
But having a good time while doing it, for sure. That's awesome. One of my favorite things to do whenever I come down and get to see you down in Durham is you take me to one of my favorite places, and we eat churros and drink hot chocolate literally around the corner from you. This is some of my favorite Cristina Perez moments.
Yes.
Is that place still open? Are you still able to go over there and get infinite amounts of churros?
Yes. So they're still open for takeout only. They have been really great with their, social distancing efforts, but still staying open. I like to consider myself an unofficial brand ambassador for Cocoa Cinnamon's, the coffee shop here in Durham. They also have a roaster, Little Waves Roastery, and their coffee is my favorite. If you have ever talked to me about coffee, you have absolutely heard me talk about Little Roasters or Little Waves Roastery in Cocoa Cinnamon. It's so good. And the churros, are amazing.
Churros are bomb. I mean, first off, if you're going to make a churro right in front of me, I'm probably going to bust out a wedding ring. You know what I'm saying? My standards are right about there. And they're just that place is so damn good. It's awesome. But you are a bit of a coffee enthusiast. Maybe, would you say, do you go so far as to call yourself a coffee snob? Like where are you at on the coffee spectrum? Would you judge people at Starbucks for ordering Americanos, or would you where are you at?
I don't have a lot of judgment for people and their coffee choices, unless it's all cream with a splash of coffee. Then I might have a little judgment. But I like to think of myself as a coffee snob, a wannabe coffee snob. So I'll taste coffee and be like, oh, this has depth in it. But if you were to ask me what are the notes in it, I'm I don't know, but I like it. That's how I feel about wine as well. If I go wine tasting and people get here's the tannins and the notes, and I'm I like this or I don't like this. So that's kind of where I'm at in coffee. But I love it. I love the ritual of making it in the morning. Jesse, my partner, always gives me a hard time because I have 5 different coffee making devices and I'm the only one in our home that drinks coffee. So
You
yeah,
have
but they
five
all,
different coffee making devices? Like,
I
okay, so we got
do.
our French press. You got a Keurig?
I have an espresso. So I have
Oh,
my
excuse
French
me.
press
Okay,
and
there
an
it is. There
espresso.
she is. Level
Yeah.
up.
Shout out to my coworkers. That was a wedding gift for us, but really for me. Although I do sometimes make Jesse lattes with it. So I have the French press, the Nespresso, a Kalita Wave pour over. I have a cold brew pitcher just to make cold brew in the fridge, and then I also have a mocha pot. And shout out to Nils who's on who got me that mocha pot for like espressos and stuff. So
Wow, that is passion, like I don't know. That's
um,
incredible.
yeah, and they all make like a slightly different coffee. They bring out different flavors in the coffee. So even though Jesse gives me a hard time about it, I'm like, they all do something different.
And you
And
can
that's why
taste those differences. You can taste those
I
differences.
can. Yeah, I can.
See,
Like, yeah.
don't discount don't discount your skills over here. Sure, maybe you're not picking up like I'm noticing a little bit of South African dirt in this one, but but still, you I feel like you got some chops in that department.
Yeah, I do. And you know, Cocoa Cinnamon's where I learned a lot of it. I feel like they, again, I'm like their unofficial brand ambassador. They
Yeah.
did like coffee tastings or coffee cuppings, really is what they're called. And I've gone to some of their classes pre-COVID and then virtually during COVID to learn, you know, about coffee and how they source coffee and
Yeah.
how they really work hard to do, you know, living wage. So I've learned also a lot about the coffee industry and how I can be a better and more conscientious consumer too.
Okay, interesting. Tell me more about that. I mean, what like for individuals that are interested in coffee? I'm going to insult you really quick. You know this that I go to Cocoa Cinnamon for the churros A and the hot chocolate second, because they have a hot chocolate tasting menu. I just love that place. So I don't really know anything about coffee. I wake up naturally obnoxious. I don't need all of these different things in the morning. I just kind of like pop out of the bed. And once I've committed to getting out of the bed, that also means I'm already making jokes. And Tina is always like, really? We're doing this early, huh? Okay. Interesting. So she is someone who does often require a little bit of coffee to get kickstarted in the morning. But so many people love coffee. What does it mean to know how to better source your coffee or to more ethically do it? Like, you know, what have you learned that you would pass on to others?
Yeah, I mean, I always recommend buying local or buying from like a smaller roaster because they typically do a lot more to build relationships with the coffee farmers that they're working with
Yeah.
to ensure that they're paying them a living wage. I know, and what I've learned with Cocoa Cinnamon is they work with a partner to connect with coffee farmers, and that partner also works with coffee farmers to help them grow higher quality coffee so they can get
Mm.
their money's worth out of it too. So yeah, when you look at inflation rates over the last couple of decades, the price of coffee hasn't increased the way the dollar has. And so there's a lot of places out there that may not necessarily be paying a living wage to folks that are farming coffee. So yeah, so just ask if you have a local roaster, ask where they source their coffee from, ask if they're committed to paying both their staff and their coffee farmers a living wage. And oftentimes they'll have information about that on their websites as well.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, let's screw you, Maxwell House. Right, your house is getting bigger, and nobody else is profiting but from you. Yeah, these big coffee companies. So that's interesting. Yeah, and there are so many. I feel like coffee, kind of like beer, is having this really beautiful moment in the country where like there's all these different roasteries that are popping up, and you walk in and there's sacks of beans everywhere, and you know, and it's kind of cool. So people have more of an opportunity to do it. And oftentimes I find that it's also kind of like beer, where if you spent your whole life drinking Bud Light and then all of a sudden you drink something from a local brewery, you're like, oh shoot, I never knew beer could taste like this. Right. And that's kind of what you've done. You've now flipped that script where it's like, I'm not going back to Columbia House, right? Like I'm not like I'm not doing that anymore because I know that the extra 50 cents, the extra dollar a bag is equal to my joy and also the ethics in my heart.
Yeah. And I think when you can find a roaster whose values align with yours too. I mean, I'm very grateful to have that in Little Waves. And they are a Latina-led, women-forward coffee shop too. So there's a lot of women that work there, and it's really cool to see what's happened there. That coffee shop opened around the same time that we moved into the neighborhood. So it's just been cool to have that around the corner. I typically I work remote full time, even like pre-COVID. So that was often a spot I went to if I needed to get out of the house for a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome.
That's
I love
awesome.
coffee. I could talk about it all day.
You really could. And I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Now, here's the interesting thing is that here in the States, we most often associate coffee coming from Central America, South America, and whatnot. But what's fascinating, one of the largest producers of coffee in the world is the Ivory Coast. But you can't get Ivory Coast coffee in the United States. And so we don't really know a lot about that. In general, most other countries laugh at what the United States calls coffee because it's like some weak sauce, low octane, watered down version. And so that's just kind of funny in its own right. But still, as we talked about, most of the coffee that we know about comes from Central America and South America and whatnot. Now, you are a very proud Latina, and it is something that you never shy away from. It's something that within moments of meeting you, I think it was in your introduction to me, right? And the way that you say certain words, it's like me, where it's kind of like me, where I'm not as Italian as you are Latino, but I'll still say like a mozzarella, right? Like I'll just be having a normal conversation. I'll be like, yeah, so the other night I had some manigotti and it was really lovely. But so I love talking to you about your heritage and about what it means for you to be Latina. Now, you grew up in California, correct?
I did. Yeah, I grew up right outside LA in a city called Whittier. My mom's on, and I think she put a shout out. She's still in Whittier now. So yeah, but I've lived on the eastern half of the United States since about 2012.
Since 2012, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And now, where did your family come from in Central America? Is it Mexico? Yes.
Yeah. My family's from Mexico. My parents are both from the state of Jalisco. Which you probably know Jalisco because you might know Guadalajara.
Yeah.
If you like tequila, you can also thank the state of Jalisco for that. So my parents are both from that state, from different parts of the state, but they met in California. So after they immigrated here. So I grew up probably up until my freshman year of high school, going regularly, like annually to Mexico, maybe once, twice a year. Often a couple weeks at a time to make the trip worth it to go visit both my mom and my dad's side of the family that's still there.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I've had a few guests on in previous weeks that identify as Black, and they talk about this moment of when they fell in love with their Blackness. I don't know if you had a similar moment in your world, and if you didn't, that's okay. You don't lose points. But I'm wondering, was there a moment that you can think back to where you fell in love with your background, your heritage, your family history?
Yeah. I don't know if I can think of a specific moment, but I can think of an incident that really spurred my identity development and my understanding of my Latinidad and my heritage. I mean, growing up where I grew up, I was surrounded by people who looked like me or had similar experiences. I could go not even a 8-minute walk from my house and find like the Mexican bakery or a grocery store with like the things we needed. And my family was nearby. So, we grew up being together a lot for like large family gatherings. And even I went to Cal State Fullerton for my undergrad. It's a minority serving institution. I think when I was there, over a third of the students identified as Hispanic or Latinx. So I was just constantly surrounded by it. And it wasn't until I was getting ready to leave California. So after I graduated from college, I became a leadership consultant for my sorority. And in that role, I traveled the country working with chapters at universities and colleges. And I think I ended up working with somewhere around 26 in 26 different states with about 30 different campuses.
Yeah.
And when I was applying for that job, there was a volunteer who, totally well-intentioned, but made a comment to one of my advisors that, Cristina has a lot of great experiences that are going to help her be successful in this role. She's going to be so great in it. And she's ethnic in the face of what a lot of our chapters are becoming. And that was one of those moments when I found out what was said. I mean, it was a microaggression, but I had never connected my identity with my success. I was raised to, you work hard to get what you need and to succeed in life. And that's what I did. And that was the first time where, there was this even like notion that I could get something because of an identity versus my skill set or my experience. And so I will say that moment, it really spearheaded how I started to think about my identity. So I think between that and leaving Southern California, right? So I traveled primarily in the Midwest, but I was all around the country at different points. And that was the first time in my life where I was truly in spaces where there was no one who looked like me or no one who understood my experiences. And that's actually when I started to realize like, oh, I got this deeper appreciation for my culture because I wasn't in it anymore. And that was such an impactful moment for me. And it's not like, I never want anyone to be microaggressed. And I also am grateful I was able to take that as a learning moment to really start to dig into my identity. And I spent the first 6 months on that job so nervous of how people were going to perceive me when my first visits were to University of Arkansas and University of North Alabama. And at first, and they were some of my favorite chapters. I had an amazing experience as a consultant, and I'm very grateful for that. But at first was like the stereotypical Californian and was like, I don't know where these states are. And I had to like pull up a state map to be like, where am I going? And then once I figured out where I was going, I was like, oh, I'm going to the South. And like, what are they going to think of this little Mexican girl from California? And I, like I said, I had a great experience. I think the only, negative experience I had based on my identity was with a restaurant server one time who was not at all affiliated with the organization. So that was really a pivotal moment in my identity development. And since then, really have spent time doing a lot of like reflection and a lot of decolonizing my thoughts and deconstructing internalized white supremacy and like all those things to help me better understand and appreciate where I come from and where my family comes from.
I love that. Cristina, for those at home, can you just tell people what is a microaggression?
Yeah. So a microaggression is that like everyday slight that people make that causes harm. This is a very, very, very simplified definition, but that causes harm to someone. And it's not that like overt, racism that you think of when someone uses a racial slur or something that's very clearly derogatory, but it's just those like everyday things. So, one I got a lot, especially after leaving California, was like, where are you from? Like, no, where are you really from? And it was those little comments that make you feel like an other in the spaces that you're in.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. And we often hear a lot of people often say, oh my gosh, you're so articulate. Right. Just those, you don't even think of, where are you from? Some of those kind of conversations that weren't necessarily said out of anything, any I don't know, any hate or anything like that, but are kind of like, oh, that was a little bit of an insult there. Right. It's like, you're a great comedian for a girl. You know what I'm saying? Like those kind of moments. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So you brought up something that's interesting because when you were back in California and you're at this, you went to a college with a bunch of other individuals that did look like you or close to you. And so you kind of had these, let's call it 22 years of experience of being in a world where you were not the only Latina in the room. And so, did you have a lot of pride for your background and for your heritage while you were there, or was it something that you could more easily take for granted because it just kind of was what it was? That was your normal.
Yeah, I definitely took it for granted. And, while, I was immersed in my culture in so many ways with my family and with the area that I was in, I really didn't actively think about my identity, outside of that. And it really wasn't until later when I started really digging into like my own exploration of my identity that I actually realized how much like internalized racism or oppression that I had in my experience, right? Because, you know, whether it was told to me directly or indirectly by, you know, society, I got this messaging ingrained in me that like white is best, right? Like you have to be this way and talk this way or look this way to be accepted, to be the best, to be beautiful, you know, whatever those things might be. And as I started reflecting later, I started to realize how just ingrained that was in my decision making and my actions. And, you know, I think back having a quinceañera is like this rite of passage for women, and I'm going to speak specifically to Mexican women, right? So it's a birthday party celebrating your 15th birthday. So kind of think of it as like our version of a sweet 16. And they're always this big elaborate things. And there's like essentially the equivalent of like a wedding party, and it basically looks like a wedding. And when it came time to start
the dresses, planning, they go all out. It's crazy.
Yes.
The quinceañeras goes. It's like, yeah. I mean, I grew up on Long Island in New York, and so you talk about a place that knows how to throw a sweet 16 party, for sure. I mean, all these wedding halls with more mirrors than you knew existed is Long Island's aesthetic. And I'm still waiting for my parents to throw me a sweet 16, but you know, we're getting there. But yeah, you're right. The quinceañera, this huge momentous thing that truly does look like a wedding. Only when you see the bride, you're like, she looks young. But yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So please keep going.
Yeah. When it came time to start planning mine, my mom and I talked about it, and I was like, like that's a lot of money to spend. I'd rather have a car. And we were like, okay. And like my grandma was devastated. She was so sad and couldn't believe that we weren't having one. But I didn't want it at the time. Like I was like, a car seems more practical. I will still say I am still like a practical, you know, gift giver and celebrator and gift receiver. But that was a decision I made at the time. And then in hindsight, as I started to think back on that decision, you know, I realized that I think part of the reason I also did that was because it was like too Mexican. And it's like, did I really want to like flaunt myself in that way? Because that's not, you know, the norm. Right. And even like last year when we were getting ready to celebrate my 30th birthday, I was like, maybe I should have like a doble quince and like have a small celebration and make up for it. But yeah, so there were moments growing up definitely where, you know, I was making decisions based on kind of how I internalized, you know, my identity. Even like hoop earrings. I didn't start wearing hoop earrings till maybe like 4 or 5 years ago because I didn't want to look like a chola, which you know, had a negative connotation growing up. There's like a reclaiming of chola fashion and chola culture now, but it had a negative connotation growing up and was often associated with like a gang culture. And so I didn't wear hoop earrings. I didn't buy them because I didn't want to be perceived as a bad Latina. Obviously now I wear them and I have lots of them and I love them, but there's just a lot of little things that I internalized. And again, like that microaggression I experienced going into, you know, my post-college life really prompted me to start reflecting on my own identity and experiences and created a deeper appreciation for them too. One that I definitely didn't have before.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So when it came time for you, when that switch flipped after you had left the house, after you'd been going around the country and whatnot, and that switch flipped for you where it's like, hey, I'm going, I want to have more pride in this, or I want to put this as a bigger priority of something that I want to talk about, be about, live, embody. During those moments, it's so fascinating that happened during a time where it would have been arguably harder for you to do it. Like, for example, when I first went down, this is a very, very different example, but when I first went down as a New Yorker to going to school in the South, I was very much like, I am not going to say y'all, right? Like you will catch me dead in the street saying the word y'all. No, get the hell out of here, bro. Right? Like I'm bringing my New Yorker down there. I'm getting more people down there to say, how you doing? Then how are y'all? And I kind of like brought this passion down there. And now I say y'all all the time and I'm a giant hypocrite. But it's so interesting where in a obviously very different different way when you choose to become more prideful in your background. I feel it right now. We just moved to Minnesota, and here in Minnesota, I like my New York accent comes out more than it does even when I'm back in New York, just because it's like I need people to know I'm from New York, right? So for you, the fact that you learned that and decided to not flip that switch, but let's say ramp it up. How was doing that by the time you got kind of like into the South, right? And working in Atlanta and working in North Carolina and whatnot.
Yeah. So I think there's the benefit of the internet now, right? Like the internet allows people to share narratives and information in a way that, I didn't have growing up. My cousin and I talk a lot about this video media channel. It's called Beto Like, and it's, an entity of BuzzFeed, and their content, their video content, memes, whatever they post, articles, it's all centered around Latinx culture. And I am so grateful that I found that platform at some point in the last couple of years, because it allows me to have this like shared experience with other folks, and not even just folks who are Mexican, but folks, across, the Latin American identity spectrum. And so, we're able to like connect across these, funny things that we grew up with, and like weird quirks that, no one really understands unless you grew up in this culture. And yeah, so I'm like super grateful for that, because I was able to find outlets in that sense. I was also able to connect with people when I did, make me more meaningful connections with folks who had that shared identity. I will say, something that is like kind of problematic in Southern California is we make assumptions that everyone's Mexican. And maybe that's just me as a Mexican, I don't know, but like not every Latinx person is Mexican. And I actually started to meet a lot.
In New York, it's Puerto Rican. You assume people are Puerto Rican in New York.
Right. Yeah. And when I moved to the eastern half of the United States, was in areas where, there are very few Mexican people or people of Mexican descent, but a lot of like Colombian and Peruvian and Puerto Rican. And it was really cool to be able to kind of connect across some shared aspects of our culture, but then also to see the differences. Yeah. And I will say too, my confidence in myself changed. And I felt more confident in that part of my identity. I remember a few years back going to a conference in Texas. And before I went to the conference, I went to visit some family that I hadn't seen in like 4 years. And I was talking to them in Spanish. I won't say my Spanish is the best. It's like very conversational. But I was talking to them in Spanish, and my cousin was like, "Your Spanish is so much better now. Like, what happened?" And I was like, "I don't know." But then as I thought about it, I'm like, it's because I'm like deconstructing all this like internalized oppression, and therefore I'm more confident in this identity and more confident in being able to share that with other people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. I think that I love to speak Spanish. It's the language that I learned the most growing up. But then I stopped practicing it. And so now I'm stuck with sounding like I know how to speak Spanish because I do the accent so well, and I get myself into trouble very quickly. And I get, because people start talking at me way quicker than I'm ready to handle. It gets awkward. But I'm glad to hear that you have tightened up those skills. And what a beautiful way that you did do that too. As well, through some of that inner healing, decolonization thought and whatnot. And that brings up an interesting conversation, because right now in the United States and a little bit around the world, we're in the midst of a fascinating and beautiful social uprising. Obviously Black Lives Matter has been something that has been happening for quite some time, since Michael Brown and Shamir Rice and some of these individuals that were unfortunately killed by police a number of years ago. But this year it obviously has garnered a lot of attention, and I think the pandemic, we can actually thank for some of that, which is great. It's a weird connection that happened there, a collision that I think has actually helped amplify voices and amplify the amount of time that people have still talked about it. But I'm wondering, as someone who is both a passionate social justice advocate, an educator, and a passionate, proud member of the Latinx community, right now everybody's talking about Black Lives Matter, and also I think indigenous people have gotten brought into the picture as well, and rightfully so, in a beautiful way. And shout out to half of Oklahoma right now.
Yes.
But that's got to be a weird place to live. Like, so where do I live now? But still, I'm curious to hear, as someone who believes in the movement and is proud of the movement that is currently that we're in the middle of, but identifies as who is a Latina. Tell me about that relationship, because there are some ways that the Black Lives Matter movement will certainly help all underrepresented populations in the country. But I'm wondering could you speak a little bit more to that? Or also, is there something on the flip side of like kind of a what about us moment, and not Kelly Clarkson? But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of mentioned this right now. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that when we can address the injustices and inequities for one community of people, that there's a trickle effect across different marginalized, underrepresented groups. And right now this is the conversation that we need to talk about: the police violence, the way we treat Black folks. Like there's so many layers to the injustice that happens for that community, and in a lot of ways, it also impacts our community, right? Like we have folks in our community who also, might identify as Black or Afro-Latinx, and understanding even within the Latinx community, how much, internalized racism that we have to deconstruct too. I mean, the racism and colorism in our community is very real and very active. And so, there's ways that we can advocate for a movement like Black Lives Matter, and also incorporate those same, kind of anti-racist actions and learnings within our own community as well. And I say this as someone who is light-skinned, who is white passing. Some might even say white. That is like a whole another conversation in and of itself. But I benefit too from the system that allows white privilege to exist. And so, and there's a lot of folks in the Latinx community that do too. And that's, I think, one of the things that's so beautiful about our community is that, the way people look and come into the space is so different. And, sometimes being in the community, you can look at someone and be like, yeah, like, oh, I think that person's Latinx. And you may or may not be right. But, with Latin America was so much impacted too by the enslavement of people, by the colonization of indigenous peoples. And so we have just such a broad spectrum. But with that, and particularly with, the colonization of Western European people and white people, the things that exist within that system also exist within our community. So for me, being able to advocate for Black Lives Matter is something that, as an American, I think is my responsibility. And also as a member of the Latinx community is my responsibility to do the work internally too.
First off, you just said a word, friend, and that was beautiful. And thank you for that. I think that it is such a complex issue. There's so many layers to it, and the fact that we are talking about it at all is good. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, because we know silence was sure as hell wasn't doing anything. And thank you to the rest of us that feel comfortable, but our comfort is not doing anything to help anybody. And so the way that you just put that was beautiful. I'm not even going to try to reframe it. And I think that for us, for individuals that are trying to be a part of the movement, and who, I guess, who maybe don't identify as someone like someone who I identify as white. I don't know if I hide that well, but still, I mean, what are your thoughts like right now? Like, how can we keep it moving? here, however many, 140 days since Breonna Taylor was killed, right? Like, I mean, I don't know the exact number of days, but it's some astronomical, disappointing figure like that. Like they just reopened finally Elijah McClain's case, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. We still don't know what's going on with George Floyd's murderers, and so there's so many levels to it. And you can feel the government start to pull back a little bit from the idea of rerouting money from police departments to social services. And what does that look like? And, are we going to do the same old thing where it's just, we're just going to keep investing money in training, which can be half-assed and not regulated. Right. And so, right now, what would be your thoughts as to how individuals can kind of can keep on keeping on with the fight and making sure that it's staying present?
Yeah, I mean, I think too, when we think about like the systemic issues and how big some of these injustices are, like it can get very overwhelming. Like how do I, as one person, affect essentially, I mean, racism and these injustices, it's like another pandemic in and of itself. So how am I as one person supposed to do that? And so I always, prompt folks to take a step back and say, what's within your sphere of influence? Like, who are the folks that are within your sphere of influence? If you volunteer for an organization, if you, work for a company, what is your sphere of influence there? And where can you start to affect change? Who are those folks that you can bring in to, if you don't feel like you have power in a space, who is that person that has power, and how can you bring them into the conversation and advocate for needed change? And of course, to be able to do that, you have to be able to do the self-work too. And so much of that, and, I feel like this is all over the internet, but you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. Like, this is messy and you're probably going to step in it at some point, and that's okay. Like, just learn from the moment and do better next time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what can be so powerful. When you look at the different systems that exist, I mean, they all start at an individual level, right? So how are you having conversations across the dining table? How are you calling in your family members who might be saying problematic things? Like, how can you even just get your family, maybe they're not saying anything problematic, but like, how do you get them to think critically about, their own identities and their own privilege and what they can do to affect change? So to me, I feel like that's often one of like the best starting points. Obviously, there's lots of other things you can do. Like, you can do the trainings, you can read the books, you can donate the money, and that is helpful too. But what I will offer too is there's so many resources out there, and I think sometimes people feel like I read these 10 books and therefore I am woke. But you can read one book and really find meaning in that book and apply it to your day-to-day life. So I think this work is exhausting, but it's needed and important. Like, I feel like I'm always simultaneously energized and exhausted doing this work, but it's worth it to me. And yeah.
What's one book that you would recommend right now for people?
So I am currently reading through White Fragility and How to Be an Anti-Racist. So those are two books that I have been slowly but surely reading through.
They're not the quickest reads.
No, and I am not like a nonfiction reader. I'm a huge reader, but very rarely read nonfiction books. So I have been like, and then for me too, with those books, I sometimes read a page and then I'm like, I need to reread this again. And then I need to sit with it for a little while. So those are two really great books. I also, and this is a book I need to revisit because it's been a few years, but I have the book, The Art of Effective Dialogue. And that has been really helpful for me as an educator and as a facilitator, to use some of those concepts when I'm engaging in like training settings or with conversations with people too. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But there's so many other books out there. And truthfully, I think I even have a stack of like 10 more books between Jesse and I's combined libraries that I still need to read. So if you're not a book person, there's lots of videos, there's lots of articles, like it's there for you. Just got to tap into it.
Yeah. Amen. And I want to come back to this idea that that you spoke about as far as like doing the work where you live or kind of where you are or noticing what's going on. But before then, we're going to do a segment, if that's okay. Oh, not these two again over here. Okay, all right, break it up, you two. Enough of this here now. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. You're not smiling now, are you? All right. That is only the sign that we've gotten a little bit too deep and we got to come back. Don't shake your head at me, Cristina. My friends, Cristina, this is a segment of the show that we call things that you didn't know about me, that you didn't know you needed to know, and now you're glad that you did. Please note that the name of the segment changes every time, and that's how I like it. So how it's going to work is that we're going to share some random facts about each other. And so I'll go first, and then I want you to share one, and then we're going to come back to some of these other conversations. So, the storm that has been in the Atlantic and now coming off the Atlantic now and obviously plowing its way through the mid-Atlantic and up north, New England, reminds me whenever I see pictures of waves like that, the very first time I ever swam in the ocean, and I grew up pretty close to the water, the very first time I ever swam in the ocean, my parents used to tell me, James, make sure, the very first time I was like, how do I swim? Like the waves are so much bigger than what I'm used to. And they said, well, just jump over the waves. Just jump over the waves. And I was like, all right, cool. I play basketball. I got hops. You know what I'm saying? We out here. And so anyway, so I would jump over the waves. And then a white cap came along and a much bigger wave. I was not given any instructions about this wave. And so I tried to jump over it and I got absolutely rocked by this wave. And I dragged myself up to the shore and I was like, you said to jump over it. And they said, oh yeah, don't jump over the white ones. So there's a little random story about me. What do you got, Cristina?
I'm going to go back to, because you just finished Boy Meets World.
Yes.
So Danielle Fishel, who plays Topanga, I don't know who hasn't watched Boy Meets World, but in case you haven't, that's who that actress is. So she actually we overlapped at Cal State Fullerton for a little bit. Like she went back to school and like people would see her around campus. But for I think like 2 or 3 years while I was in college, I worked at Victoria's Secret. And I was a shopper and a bra specialist there. And she came in and I got to work with her and help her shop, except at the time, Victoria's Secret wasn't very inclusive in their sizes. So I ended up sending her to Nordstrom's to the dismay of my manager. But we didn't have a fitter. But it was so cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. So yeah, that's I guess.
Was she cool in person?
So nice. She was so nice and so kind and was even kind when like we didn't have anything for her and I had to send her somewhere else. So that was a really cool experience. I guess it's the perks of going to school in Orange County.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And normally we do a Q&A at the end of this. My friends, just so you know, an inappropriate question for the Q&A would be around Danielle Fishel shopping at Victoria's Secrets. But feel free to ask Cristina any other question. Yeah, I love it. Cristina, tell me, do you have any fears? Do you have any things that you fear that you're just that just kind of like rack your brain from time to time?
Yeah, like real fears or like weird fears.
Let's start with a weird fear first, because that sounds fun. But you share a weird fear and I'll share a weird fear. How's that sound?
Yeah. Okay. I can't kill bugs for the life of me. Like big bugs that will crunch, that will make a noise. I can't do it. So for my Clemson folks that are on, y'all know about my Clemson shenanigans with bugs. But
would you save the bugs? Like do like the cup and the paper technique, or would it be like somebody else get in here and get to crunching?
No. So I would get a cup, but I would spray like bug killer spray on the floor and slide the cup over it and let the bug die. And then like a day later when it was dead, I would like sweep it up and get rid of it. So like folks would walk into my apartment at Clemson, and I live, for those of y'all on from Clemson, I lived in Calhoun Courts, and which is like on the edge of the woods. And there was just always bugs. One time there was a lizard in my apartment. And so they would walk in and there would be like 4 or 5 cups around the floor with just like dead bugs in them.
That wasn't like, those weren't like dead soldiers from Flip Cup the night before. No. Those were dead bugs with an intentionally flipped cup. Well, there you go. Yeah.
So to his dismay, Jesse is the designated bug killer in this house, or bug getter, because I won't do it if they crunch.
And here's the funny thing about, I feel like Jesse's a man, right? He's a power lifter. He can do what he does. But I feel like Jesse also has probably a pretty good squeal also.
he puts on a good front. I will
Good
say
for
that.
him. Good for him. I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have a weird fear of butterflies. I find them to be very erratic. I don't know where they're going. I don't know what's happening. I can't trust them. Like everything else, I'm like, I know your plan. With butterflies, I'm like, I don't even know what your goal is. I don't know where you're going. I don't know what your flight path is. And so I don't run from butterflies. Whenever a butterfly is around, I'm like, because I'm like, don't do, like, it's a little bit like of Mice and Men, and I'm like Lenny and they're the rabbit, or I'm like, don't move because you're going to kill the butterfly.
Oh my gosh.
How about the next level? What's give me a slightly deeper fear.
Yeah. I have very deep fears of inadequacy, but more specifically being inadequate to a point of letting others down.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will let myself down before I try to let someone else down.
Yeah. Tell me, what does letting somebody else down look like to you?
Yeah. I mean, it could be as small as something as like not meeting a deadline, or, if we're working collaboratively on something, not pulling my end of it. It can also look like not being there, not being present, not being supportive, whatever that reason might be. So
yeah. What drives that fear? Do you know where that fear comes from?
Well, if we were going to go back to a counseling skills class from grad school, that's the moment I learned about, I'm going to totally butcher it now, but it's like the family therapy, family structure, I don't know,
yeah.
whatever it's called.
Somebody will put it in the chat. Yeah, someone remembered.
yeah. Someone type it in the comments if you remember. But yeah, I remember the class, that week where we were learning about that theory specifically. We were talking about our roles in our families. Like what was your role? Who were you? And I was like the overachiever and in everything that I did. And I think for a lot of things, I honestly didn't really, this is like humble brag, but not really humble. Like I didn't have to try really hard to be good at most of the things that I took on. Or my mom will probably say I just stopped doing the things I wasn't good at. I don't know. But yeah, so that's who I was. And it was that moment in grad school where I was like, oh, because then the next question was, now how does that role like show up for you today? And I was like, oh, that was a deep class. So yeah, I think it just has that perfectionist tendencies. I'm a Enneagram 1. So all about like the greater good and perfectionism and all that jazz. So I think that's probably where a lot of it stems from. And I just like want to make people happy. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's got to be so interesting. I mean, you are let's call you a newlywed, right? What are we, a year and a half in, a year in, 2 years? We two?
No, a year and a half.
A year and a half.
I can't do math.
That's fine. Is your
Jesse
will put it in here.
Yeah.
But so as a newlywed, who moved to North Carolina, to be, fortunately had a job that understood your value and knew that you were valuable, even working remotely. And so they took a shot on letting you work remotely, and you blew it out of the damn water. And so, but you moved to another part of the country to be closer to your partner / in the same building. And and so, but it's interesting to carry that perfectionism into a relationship. That's a lot of weight to carry for you. How was that transition for you in letting your partner, letting Jesse see the imperfect side of you? Now, I know that you're someone who's no stranger to embarrassing yourself from time to time, but that's not really what we're necessarily talking about here. But how was that, letting somebody in and knowing that they were going to love you potentially even more because of it?
Yeah. Well, I think even before we actually lived together, I mean, Jesse will tell you he knew what he was in for.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, almost. There we go. We're almost there at a year and a half. I can't do fast math, so to have to count from February to now was not going to happen for me. So yeah, so I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that never at any point has he like ever had me questioning that he cared about me with the weird quirks and all. And I will acknowledge, and we've talked about this, probably the last couple months have not been like the best partner or roommate. I have probably worked way too much, and I'm getting ready to try to take some time off. And so, yeah, I think it was hard at first. I mean, I think even the first couple months of dating, I think I knew deep down that like he was who I wanted to be with for the rest of my life. But I was really scared to say that. Like I was really scared to date someone in the field. I was really scared to like commingle my professional and my personal life. Like we were both at Clemson working in student affairs. And I just, yeah, it was really nerve wracking. And finally I was like, well, who am I kidding? Like, this is who I know, this is who I want to marry. And, even though we weren't necessarily in a rush to get married, but I just knew. And I mean, he'll probably tell you that he knew sooner than I did, which is probably true. But, it was really scary. It's really scary to be vulnerable with someone. And then moving in together, I mean, we both knew going into it that, we wanted to live together before we took any next step in our relationship to make sure that we wouldn't drive each other up the wall.
Yeah.
And truthfully, the first few months of living together, I remember it was my first or second, I think it was my first like real visit back to the office. It was about 5 months or so after Jesse and I moved in together. And I remember everyone was like, so what's happening? Are you going to get married now that you've been living together? What's next? And I was like, I think Jesse's still trying to figure out if he can live with me because I am not an easy person to live with. I'm like, I like things to be cleaned a certain way and organized a certain way. And I also like love being together and need my me time sometimes. Like I was like, I don't know about it. And then I ended up going home that weekend and he proposed. So clearly it was a different space, but than I was. And clearly I said yes. But it was scary. It's scary to be vulnerable, but also there was never any point where I didn't feel supported in that and opening up to that.
Yeah. That power. I mean, I don't know what comes first in relationships, love or vulnerability. But I know that they're pretty quickly, they follow each other pretty quickly. It's probably vulnerability first. But I think that it is beautiful to hear you talk about that because, I mean, you are someone who loves things to look a certain way, right? Like anytime I've walked into the house, I'm like, well, don't touch anything. Even though that's the opposite of how you want me to feel, right? Like, right. But, it's not like I'm on eggshells when I'm in the house. Please don't hear that. But it's an immaculate space, right? It's just beautiful, meticulously cleaned and whatnot. And I know that it's something that is, that matters to you, but it's so hard because you also work in an industry. You work in an industry that consistently pushes perfectionism onto its people, right? You work in the sorority world, and in the sorority world, right? There's this idea that perfectionism is the only way that people are going to want to join your organization. We have to look a certain way on these nights, and we have to do this and dress this way and match this way. So it's interesting the way that your perfectionism kind of folds into some of the work that you do, but yet you also fight against those norms wholeheartedly. How is that for you?
Yeah, it's hard. It's interesting too, as I've grown older, how my values have evolved and how my outlook on things have evolved. When I was in college and when I was a leadership consultant, I lived for sorority recruitment. Yeah. Like I loved it. It was great. And that's really the aspect, one of the biggest aspects where it's about, how you look, how you present yourself, what your conversations look like. And there's like this stuff throughout the year that's like, if you're going to wear letters, you have to be like 80 pie ready, right? Like you have to look a certain way when you wear letters so you represent us well. And that was ingrained in me. And I would still say that there's still some aspects of that are ingrained in me, right? Like even the way that I might engage in like public channels is still authentically me, but I still have moments where I'm like, what is this going to sound like? Is this going to be effective? Just because that's so ingrained in me. But I am also here for now, as I've gotten older, like what does like meaningful, authentic connection look like? And how do we create spaces where our members can be their authentic selves, in a space where they can thrive and they feel like they belong? And for me, that mindset is so centered around the work that I do, both just generally in my job and also in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I do in my job. And so being able to grant that grace to people, to let them know that who they bring to the table is more than good enough. Like they can be their authentic selves in ADPi and find those connections. And I hope that we can, not just in my own organization, but across all the sororities, like continue to incorporate that mindset. And that's what I'm hoping, even coming into this whole, like what fall looks like for COVID. I mean, I feel like this has made everyone, regardless of what industry you're in, step back and think about what's important, like what's important for the employee experience, what's important in our operations, and really requiring us to kind of pare down what we've been doing, so we're focusing on the important stuff. And I think this is a cool opportunity for us, whether our folks are meeting virtually or social distance, to be able to focus on like what's most important. And to me, that's, in my space, building meaningful connections and developing women to be their best. And part of that is giving them space to be their authentic selves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I agree with you. I think it's beautiful. I'm currently in an interesting situation in my life where Tina and I live in Minneapolis. We just bought a house that hopefully we're going to close on if nothing goes wrong in 3 weeks, which means who knows what the hell's going to happen. But hopefully it'll work out. But we're excited, and we started to dream about like, what does our life look like, right? Like we're probably going to live in that house for maybe 10 years or more. Who knows? But still, and thinking about it, it's like, all right, well, how are we going to build community? What are ways to build community? Neither of us really are we're not really religious people, so the church isn't a place where we're going to do it. But we thought about ways to get involved socially and stuff like that. And one thing is that I love to play golf, right? And I love to play golf. And so I grew up in a household where my father was a member at a country club, and it wasn't some crazy hoi polloi, whatever country club, but it still was a country club, right? It still was a membership. It still was by nature exclusionary, right? And so, but at the same time, I'm like, well, but that was a cool experience because I love to play golf. I love the fact that I could build community. I could meet other individuals that are of a level of success that I would be excited to have in my network, right? Like, and just the old catchphrase, your network divides your net worth kind of thing. And so it's like, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I never want to be the most successful person in the room. So how can I surround myself by a community where that could better me in that way, while I get to do a hobby that I really love and enjoy getting better at, and could also potentially have a place for, if we're fortunate to have kids, where it's like, hey, there's a pool for the kids to swim in, or there's tennis, or there's, I don't know, whatever the hell else happens at country clubs. I don't really know. But it's fascinating to be there while at the same time thinking about like, I'm passionate about social justice. I'm passionate about inclusion, creating spaces where people can belong and whatnot. And so I went and played a country golf course recently that my buddy is a member at. And literally I saw a wall of all the members in the clubhouse, and there was one black guy, and I was like, oh, look, it's everybody's black friend. Right. And my buddy like let off an awkward chuckle because he knew it was true. And so it's a fascinating thing because you work in an industry that struggles with diversity and inclusion, and that is working to become more inclusive and has been putting in some work. But at the end of the day, it's still about the bottom dollar. It's still there's a lot about image that still matters. And that's a tough thing that I know you are fighting the good fight against. So here's my question. Took a long walk for a short drink here. And that is, do you think it is better to fight the good fight from within or from the outside?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's options for both, but I think in spaces where there is like a selective membership process, whether it's a country club, whether it's, the plethora of member organizations that exist out there, whether it's a sorority or fraternity. I think that at times there can definitely be pressure put from external entities to affect change. But, for me, can't imagine not doing this work from the inside. And I feel very fortunate that, I have relationships in our organization that give me access to folks in leadership. And I have experiences in the organization that give me access to folks in leadership in a way that our 220,000 plus members may not have.
Yeah.
And so for me in that space, it's using, the power and the access that I have to have these important conversations. And that's what I have, really tried to infuse into my work these last 4 years that I've been in the role. So for me, I think the change can happen from the inside. I do think, I feel like the question a lot of times lately is like, do you just fully dismantle it and start over? Or do you try to fix what's already there? Mm-hmm. And I kind of think sometimes it's a little bit of both. Like, I think there's some processes that we have to look at and just totally upend. And I also think that there's other things where we can start to, understand the impact that they've had. For me and my work specifically, I am with an organization that has an exclusionary past. And we have perpetuated a lot of the oppression and racism that exists in our society and on our campuses. And because of that, I feel the responsibility to, as a staff member in this organization, to learn from that and use that learning to make sure we can do better moving forward, and to help our members understand, how to do better moving forward. Like we have that responsibility. I think in a college setting, for example, particularly at public institutions, there's a lot of stuff that students can do and never be held accountable for because it's under, protected speech or whatever that might be. But us as a private organization, if they're one of our members, we can hold them accountable. And that's a way to affect change, on an individual level. Like we can hold an organization accountable in a way that maybe the university might not be able to do, again, particularly at public institutions where things might be considered protected speech. So that's where I look to my work to see, how do we affect that change from within our leadership, within our members, because we are a microcosm of our greater society. And while, I think everyone has different feelings about dismantling, abolishing versus keeping the system intact, I know from what I've seen in other situations, oftentimes when you dismantle, the problems are still existing. Like they're not going to go away because they're a microcosm of our greater society. So why might as well try to do the internal work?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you thought about that. It's a question that I've often obviously racked my brain, and I'm really like the way that you answered it because I think it means I can join a country club. And so thank you for that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, it's just important to think about is like, what are the circles that you run in, right? Like I even run in the National Speakers Association, which is an organization that has a lot of affluence in it, a lot of history and a lot of tradition and a lot of whiteness. And so what does that look like? I have a good friend of mine who's been on the show before, Jessica Pettit, who's been a board member of that organization. And she's like, I've joined the board so I could try to change it. And I see the value that the organization brings to so many. And there's just some ways that we're taking some missteps. And so, yeah, that's always a fascinating question. What you brought up is, do you take it all down or do you kind of work with what you got? What is easier to do? I guess it probably depends on how far gone it is, right? It's kind of like when you get in an accident, is this car totaled or is it going to be worth the effort to make it? And I don't know how you make that choice, but I love, Cristina, that you have made that choice and that you are putting in the work. And I admire the work that you do and the way that you do it. Those women are, whether they know it or not, and I believe they do, are grateful to have you because you certainly make that organization and the whole industry that you work in better. So I can't thank you enough for what you do. I'm so excited that you joined me in the diner tonight, Cristina. How you feeling?
Good. I mean, I always love talking to you, but now I'm going to be wired after this, and Jesse's going to be like in bed, and I'm going to be up playing The Sims or doing something dumb. Probably. I'm so awake and energized.
That's another fun quirk about you, that you do love The Sims.
I do love The Sims.
That's so fun. That's so fun. Cristina, it has been so special getting to hang out with you. I cannot thank you enough. For those of you that are listening to the podcast right now, make sure that you check out the show notes where you can learn more about where to find Cristina and how to get in contact with her. She's doing some pretty incredible work, and I recommend following up with her too if you have any instructional design questions, social justice matters, and whatnot. Just a great resource to have in your pocket for sure. And so, thank you all so much for listening on the podcast. And as always, if you're interested in hearing the Q&A with Cristina, please feel free to jump to my YouTube page so you can see what some other individuals had some questions for Cristina, just so you can learn a little bit more about her brilliance. Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all, and take care. Cristina, do you mind if we do a little bit of a Q&A with you?
Not at all. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Jesse said, so that's a normal night where you just talk his ear off and then he goes to bed and you play The Sims. So this is
basically, yes. Yeah, that is like my mindless stress reliever. I think I've played like every edition of The Sims too since like I was, I don't know, in grade school, I don't know, middle school, whenever it came out.
It's such a delight. It's one of my favorite random facts about you.
Yeah.
So, my friends, if you have questions for Cristina about anything that we talked about tonight, or about some other stuff, if you want to know a little bit more about the work that she does, if you want to know a little bit more about, if you have questions about her Latina background and whatnot, and if she is going to have, since she didn't do a doble quince, is she going to do a whatever a triple quince is at 45 to make it up. But if you have any questions for Cristina, please throw those in the chat. The first one is coming from by far our most beautiful follower, aka my wife. What's going on with this headband, Cristina? Where's that from?
It's from your friend Jess's Headbands of Hope. That can be a headband rec if anyone needs that. I have an obsession with Headbands of Hope, and I probably buy more headbands and spend more money than I should. But to quote Tina, every time you buy a headband, they donate one to a child who is undergoing medical treatment, and that way they can feel beautiful when they're in the hospital too. So the website probably articulates that way better than I do. So I feel less guilty buying them because they go to a good cause too. So they're great. I just ordered some more the other day, and I can't wait till they come. And they make me feel like moderately decent when I have to do Zoom calls all day.
Hell yeah. I love that. This is actually Jess Ekstrom is going to be on the show eventually. But this is her book right here. It's called Chasing the Bright Side. Oh my God. Yay. Jess Ekstrom. She's going to be so happy. But definitely check out Headbands of Hope for sure. I've rocked some of their headbands. They also make cool turbans that you can wear as a mask. Though temporarily, I don't think they're the thickest material, but they are cute as hell. I love that. What else? Betsy asked, do you have a favorite TikTok?
Oh my gosh.
Are you a TikTok? Are you a TikToker, Cristina?
Am I a TikToker? So if I'm not up late playing The Sims, I'm up late watching TikToks, also to Jesse's delight. I don't really have I have like a flavor of the week with TikTok, or sometimes of the day, just depends what mood I'm in. So right now though, it's not a specific TikTok, but there's this couple, I think one of them's named Chris Olsen. And the other one's Ian, maybe, I don't know, but they do these like funny challenges. They're this gay couple, and I think his name is Ian. I'm not really sure. I'm bad with names, but it's just so funny. They're so funny, and you need to follow them. So they'll do these challenges like, oh, you could have been nicer to me today, but then the one partner like comes up with like all this amazing stuff. So anyway, they're hilarious. You should watch them. If Ginny Beth is on, maybe you can put their screen names, Ginny Beth, because Ginny Beth and I also send TikToks.
Here we go. Ginny Beth has got your back.
Yeah, Ian and Chris, look them up. They're great.
Ian and Chris for sure. Apparently Ginny's also a Headbands of Hope fan. Shout out to you, Ginny Beth. You are wonderful. Scott asked a cool question. With your love of coffee, what is your favorite or go-to to eat with your coffee? What do you what's your favorite combo besides churros, of course?
Yeah. Well, besides churros, and also for a stint there, I wasn't having anything, and then I got really bad heartburn, and my doctor was like, "Don't drink coffee on an empty stomach." So I learned my lesson. But my favorite thing is pan dulce. So it's like a Mexican sweetbread. There's a lot of different types that are out there, but my favorite is a concha, which is this like round, kind of puffy. It's not puffy, I don't know, but it's like round, and it has like a design on it. I was trying to see if I had a picture of one around here because I have some stickers of that type of bread. So I really like that. And then in pan dulce, they also have these things called puerquitos, which they almost have like a gingerbread type taste, but they use this brown sugar it's called piloncillo. And it's like brown sugar that's, I think, like unprocessed. I don't know. It comes in a cone. But anyway, those are probably like my two go-tos with my coffee when I'm able to get my hands on some. There's some bakeries around here, but there's a bakery like near my mom's house in California that has like the best pan dulce. And every time I go home to visit, I get like a box of them and like pack it up very protected in my suitcase so I can bring some back.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Ebony's got your back here too.
Yes.
Them pinconchas.
So good. They're so good.
I love it. A fun fact, randomly tied in here. My first mixtape is called Brown Sugar. So don't ask why. Tina asked a question. This is interesting because we didn't overlap at Clemson, but we did spend a couple of moments at Clemson together. Yeah. I don't know if you have a favorite memory though. My favorite, we probably have the same favorite memory, but yeah, I'll be curious. Go ahead. You go first.
Yeah. Is yours Spill the Beans?
Hell yeah, Spill the Beans.
Yeah. So James and we met first virtually because you were supposed to come and do a presentation with our student group, but then like the snow happened and everything got shut down. And which actually for South Carolina, it was a pretty big snow, but for anyone else,
it really was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you ended up, I think, doing something virtually, and I honestly cannot right now remember what my title was in the student organization when I was an officer, but part of my role was like doing social media. So I think I was like live tweeting. Anyway, so that's how we met through that. I think I connected with you or emailed with you. But anyway, you came into town and we went to Spill the Beans, which is this delicious ice cream place in Clemson. And that was when we like met in IRL in real life. And I will never forget, we get ice cream, we sit down, and one of the first things you said to me was, "So, Cristina, why does everyone love you?" And I was like so uncomfortable. I was like, because I'm much better now, and I will attribute part of this being better about this now because of you. But I was so bad at taking compliments or being recognized. And so when you said that to me, I was like, "What?" And you were like, "Everyone I talked to today when I said I was meeting with you, everyone was like, 'Oh, I love her. I love her.'" And so he's like, "What?" You were like, "Why do people love you?" And I think I said something like, "Because I don't know if I can say bad words on here, but because I get ish done." Like, I think I was.
I made fun of Jersey earlier, so you're fine.
Yeah. And then you gave me a whole pep talk about like, you're going to be getting ready to job search and you should be able to talk about yourself and celebrate these things. And yeah, that was just a fun conversation.
Amen. That is also that's also my favorite memory of you, because it was the first time that we did, in fact, meet in life, and everybody was talking about how you were just an incredible individual. And I remember I spoke to your whole graduate cohort. And then I offered it up. I said, "Hey, if anybody wants to get together and have a conversation with me, I know that's weird. We just met, but I'm in the field. Your advisor backs me up. So I'm hopefully not just some weird dude. We're going to meet in a public place, but like, if I can help you out in any way, shape or form, let me know." And I remember you and Jesse both took me up on that independently. And that was awesome. Jesse and I went to TD's and had some of those banging French fries that they have over there. So, but it was just such a cool conversation, and Spill the Beans has incredible ice cream.
Yes. So good.
So yeah. Speaking of our Clemson friends, Fred the man asked a really cool question right here. What do you miss most about the West Coast?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing's my family, which is, maybe a given, maybe not a given for some people. I don't know, but it is hard to be so far from home. I think one of the things I'm grateful for coming out of COVID is I feel like it's normalized being on video a little more. So I actually, especially in the first couple months, felt like I was talking to my family more than I usually did because we were being intentional about making that time together. So that it is hard. Like most of my family is dispersed throughout California, but it is hard being far from home. Even still now that it's been, 8 or 9 years that I haven't lived there. But I mean, I think aside from that of actual like California things, I miss like the food. Like we have good
Real
food here in
tacos.
Durham. Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's a restaurant walking distance from my house that makes bangin tacos. The family that owns it is from Mexico. They're from Michoacan, and they have amazing food. So like I think more so from California, it's like the variety of food. Like it was easy to get like Korean barbecue or to go get like all the different types of Mexican and the weather, of course, too. I mean, the weather here is fine. I just don't do humidity.
It's
a lot of it.
In the summer, it's like soup in North and South Carolina. It's offensive. Have you noticed, do you have any things about the East Coast that you do really love that maybe you didn't know before?
Yeah. I think, in the places that I've lived, maybe minus Atlanta, because Atlanta, not so much, but in other places I've lived, I mean, the pace of things is really nice. Like people greet each other and it doesn't feel, I remember my mom, the first time I took her to Clemson, we were walking around and I had been living, away from California for 2 years at that point, but we went to Clemson and, you pass by people and you're like, hey, hello, good afternoon. And every time my mom was like, do you know that person? And I'm like, no, Mom, everyone just says hi to each other here. It's just what happens. And so, so that I forget that that's not really like the norm, where I grew up. I will also say that I like the beaches here better, specifically the water. Like the water is not ice cold. So I wish I lived closer to the beach, but I do like that about the East Coast.
That Pacific is brisk.
So all the time, even in summer, it's freezing.
All the time. Yeah, it's like it's the largest body of water or something. Science. I love that. It's funny because I don't associate what you just said with the East Coast, but I do with the Southeast for sure.
Definitely, yes. It's a difference. There's a difference for sure.
Indeed. Your badass cousin is out here, West Coast, best coast.
Yes. Also, my cousin's the best. Much of my identity development processing is done with them. So, Nadia, definitely grateful for you and all our deep conversations.
Yeah, I love
and the
that.
fun ones too, and the deep ones too.
And of course, I miss you too, baby girl. I think this photo is from your wedding. In her profile. I'm pretty sure I recognize that dress, looking beautiful that day. Sylvia was. That's
I love you, Mom.
I love it. So these are great. My dad has a comment for you. Just a little bit of love from my father. I agree, Dad. Sweet. I agree.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Ginny asked a question. What is the thing that you love the most about your house?
Yeah.
A fun random question. I don't know. I didn't know if that was an inside joke or not.
No, I don't think so. Probably a real question, knowing GB. But it's probably decor wise, is probably my office. And it's really like all my decorations that I had before I moved in with Jesse just came into my office. So that way the rest of the house could be more like ours. Because if you can tell, like it is very eclectic and colorful and probably wouldn't fit everywhere else in the house. So I have this gallery wall. I have this like color-coded bookcase. I also have another bookcase right here that you can't see that has more books. My dream is to have like floor to ceiling bookshelves with like
one of those ladders. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. But I would say of all these things, probably one of my most favorite is, I don't know which way to point, this thing right here. Mm-hmm. So this, I'm going to figure out how to point to that, is a shadow box with lapel pins or magnets, whatever I could find, because not everyone had a lapel pin of the universities and colleges that I visited when I was a leadership consultant.
Oh, cool. So that's awesome.
I lived out of a suitcase. So I was like, what's small that I could get as a souvenir from everywhere? So that's a fun little memory.
I love that. Jesse says so many books.
He one time tried to say, I'm about to institute a 1 in, 1 out policy when you buy more books. And I think I gave him like a death glare when he said that. And I was like, don't mess with my books.
And some of your sisters are still throwing shade at your coffee love here.
Oh my gosh.
So
yeah, I love some coffee.
That's it. Cristina, I cannot thank you enough. It is clear, based on the love that you got in these comments, just how much love that you put out there that comes back to you. And I hope that you let that love feel you. It has been so special getting to hang out with you and just to learn from you and to speak with you. Thanks for coming to the diner tonight, friend.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good night, everyone.
Hell yeah. I love it. All right, y'all. Say goodbye to Cristina, and we hope you have a great evening. Cristina, take care. We'll see you soon. My friends, thank you so much for coming to the diner tonight and hanging out with me. We're here every Wednesday night, 9:00 East Coast time, and that is 6:00 Pacific Coast time. No one says that. But I would love to have you keep coming back, my friends. Find me on Facebook, James Robillata, speaker, host, author, I think is what the page is called. If you want to know about the next episodes that we have coming out, this is also going to be a podcast real soon, like within the next few weeks. And I'm really excited about that as well. So you'll be able to listen to your favorite episodes again in that format. But my friends, it's been so special getting to hang out with you. Until then, please keep punching small talk in the face by asking better questions. You all take care. Be well.